everybody. It's Dave here, along with, from the frozen north, Mr. Darren Campbell, and we are Good Morning Gallahorn's two old bloggers. How you all doing? How you doing, Darren?
I'm doing great, Dave, and happy to report it's not as frozen here lately. A little bit of warming up a bit, like you were saying, like in the 20s or 30s Fahrenheit. Minus like +1, +2 Celsius around here. I know that's hard for people to fathom if you're like somewhere like Georgia and you're just watching the Masters and it's all green and shit. But it won't be like that here for like until the middle of June.
The Masters. That always symbolized spring for me. Watching, seeing the azaleas and the green, immaculate course. It was wonderful. Now, but we're not here to talk about golf. We're here to talk about football, Minnesota Vikings in particular. And what drives this show today is we're going to bring up a few subjects. First one, let's talk about the misdeeds, or whatever got
Skull Dan.
Jeff Gladney in trouble and what that means for the Vikings defense.
Because we were sort of on a bi-weekly schedule here right now. We're behind the times as far as the Vikings latest news, but this was not welcome news when it was announced a week or two ago, and not very good news. And you bring up the court documents.
The court documents
can't get anything by Dave Stefano, I'll tell you.
Nope. Felony, assault, family violence.
And it was as usual, we always have to say, this hasn't gone through the courts yet, and it's accused stuff, but the details are pretty disturbing. He's accused of hitting, strangling, and grabbing a young woman who we assume he had a relationship with, grabbing her by the hair, dragging her on the ground, even managed to do that outside of a vehicle that he was driving. I don't know how you managed to do that, but apparently, allegedly, that's what Gladney did. And Dave, you've got daughters. I've got a daughter. We all have significant people in our lives who are, of the opposite sex. And so I've got no time for this kind of shit from anybody who's in any walk of life, and particularly when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings. So if this proves to be like the truth, I would have no problem seeing Gladney get kicked to the curb. We're done with him. We don't need that kind of an individual on our team. I know everybody deserves a second chance, but for me, his second chance would be somewhere else on another team. Having said that,
from what I gather, there is physical evidence that this did occur. She went to the hospital after the fact, and it was documented. So that generally puts out the option of a false accusation because those things have happened before. So it looks to be true, and if that was your daughter, you'd be irate, to say the least.
Yeah.
That would be minimum.
Yes, that would be minimum.
He is out on $10,000 bond working on his defense because it will go to court. There's no date, diving into Dallas County's county clerk office. There's no date posted as when his first hearing is going to be yet. But that puts the Vikings have said they're watching. The NFL, I'm sure, is investigating as well. And even if he settles outside of court, right? They go civilly, and he gives her a lot of money and tells her to be quiet, signs an NDA, which could happen. We may not want it to. We may want prosecution because we don't want to see people in society like that. But even if he does, the NFL should take, and the Vikings should take action against him. Dan brought up, it's a good thing we brought Mackenzie Alexander back. And that gets to the point of how does this affect the defense? We had all thought Gladney was going to be penciled in as the starting nickel this year. And then they brought Mackenzie Alexander, and then you said, well, at least we got a battle there. How do you see it affecting the defense?
Yeah, it affects the depth for sure. The fact that, and you talked about this on our last show when I was kind of assuming that Mike Hughes was not going to be in a Viking uniform, but apparently he will be, and if he's healthy, that the Gladney, if Hughes is back, even though Hughes has never played all that great during his time, but he is a guy with somewhat of a track record, and he can provide us with some depth there. I don't think that certainly wasn't a guarantee that Gladney was going to be the starting nickel. No. I think Mac Alexander is got a bigger track record, better track record, more accomplished in that role than Jeff Gladney is at this point. But considering how much that NFL defenses these days have to play 4 cornerbacks, that there still would have been a role for Jeff Gladney, even if he wasn't the starting nickel or a starting corner. And I think we pretty much figured that Dantzler and Peterson are going to be the starters on the outside.
Right. And Mike Zimmer likes to rotate on occasion, just like on the defensive line. He likes to rotate, give a guy a breather. Or if somebody gets dinged up briefly, you got somebody to put in there. And it would have been nice to have Gladney as that 4th guy and Hughes as the 5th or whatever. To me, it would have been interesting to see the competition in camp. I would have loved to have seen that.
And the thing that Dan was saying, it's good that we got Alexander back, and it's good because they both probably were going to play the same type of position. They'd be a nickel corner. And also Gladney took that spot that Mac Alexander had the previous couple of years, where Zimmer would, from time to time, would send Alexander on a corner blitz. And that's what he was doing, having Gladney do. So getting Max Alexander back means that we're not going to lose that part of it from the nickel corner spot. It does hurt depth. It's not like a huge blow. The only thing is that it does do is you don't know what the future holds for Gladney. He was the 31st overall pick in the draft, which means he was one of the top 30 players in one of the top 30
eligible for the 5th-year option.
So you don't know that guy with that kind of talent. If he can take the next leap or two in year 2, he could be an upgrade over Mac Alexander at the nickel corner, and could eventually be your starter if you don't bring Peterson back after this year, because he's only signed for 1-year deal. Now, I know most of our concerns are about the first year, the immediate this season for the Vikings and how that impacts him. But it impacts him, I think, less so this year, but maybe more so down the road if they don't keep him. The thing is, Dave, as you know, is that this situation could end up playing out much like the Chris Cook thing did about a decade ago, when Cook got accused, and I can't remember how that all went. I think his girlfriend ended up not pressing charges or something, even though, and so he kind of got off, but it seemed pretty clear that he did what had happened there. And a lot of it was along the same lines as what Gladney did, except for the car dragging stuff. But there was the hitting and I think strangling the stuff that went there. The Vikings they didn't play Cook the whole year. They left him off. And then when the legal stuff got sorted out, they brought him back the next year, I guess not with open arms, but they brought him back, and he eventually ended up starting. And I think that if you were a guy like a Caleb Jones a couple of years ago and you get accused of something like this, and you're like a practice squad player or a fringe roster guy, you're gone. If you're the 31st overall pick, you're probably not gone. And that's kind of how the NFL works. The Vikings probably look at it, hey, we're in the business of winning football games. And despite all of the stuff that we say about doing good for the community and all of that stuff. In the end, most fans only care about, did you make the playoffs? Did you win the Super Bowl? And if a guy like Gladney can help you do that somewhere down the road, you're probably trying to figure out a way to keep him, get him rehabilitated, get him into counseling. We might not like it, but those are the kind of decisions that football people have to make. And I expect that what'll happen with
Peterson.
Yeah, that's right. And Peterson was like a grade A case because obviously he had quite a bit different track record on the field than Jeff Gladney or Chris Cook did. Right. He was a guy you actually knew was going to help you win football games, whereas with Gladney, it's not really sure. But Gladney, again, was your second first-round pick in 2020, and I'd be shocked, even though I would not have a problem with it, but I'd be shocked if they cut him loose because they see what he might be able to do for them in 2022, even if he doesn't do anything this year. He's likely going to get a 6-game suspension anyway, regardless of what happens legally. And so that'll be almost half the season gone. And they might not bring him back at all because they've got decent depth there. But I kind of see them hanging on to him. If they let him go, then he gets to do the counseling. Some team will get him for like 20 cents on the dollar and be able to develop him. Yeah. And the Vikings probably don't want to see that kind of a sunken cost. It's one thing if it's like a Demetrius Underwood where there's just no way you can keep him on the field because of his issues. But with Gladney, it's probably I think that they'll try to find a way to keep him around beyond this year, even if he doesn't contribute much in 2021.
Well, we're talking immediately 21, but if you look at 22, if he's gone, there's only one corner that's still on the roster at that time, and that's Dantzler. Everybody else's contract expired.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've got Peterson and Mack are under 1-year deals. Hughes, they declined the 5th-year option. So he's basically in a prove-it year for him. He's got to stay healthy. I mean, he has talent. He was obviously a first-rounder too and had talent and flashed it at times. But other than that, you have Dantzler. That's it, right? And the whole idea was, well, at least you'd have Dantzler and Gladney. If you get rid of Gladney, you don't have Gladney. So
no, you don't, and it may impact I don't think I was half joking when this got announced that this may open up a corner, Zimmer to take a corner at 14 or in the first round or wherever, and I don't know about that, but we do have 4 4th-rounders and two
one there.
Yeah, and 2 3rd-rounders. So there's kind of a spot. You got 6 picks in those middle kind of early rounds, and that's where maybe they weren't going to select a corner that early in the draft, and now they got to think about it because of the Gladney situation. They don't know A, if he'll play at all this year, or B, if the court stuff turns out to get even uglier than it already is, then you maybe you just say, no, we just can't keep this guy. It's going to be too much.
It's minimum jail time. So
yeah,
he's not available anyways.
No, and Viking Jerome was just talking about Hughes, and I think even if Hughes, if this opens up more playing time for him and he does very well, there's certainly no guarantee that the Vikings would bring him back or next year either, depending on what value they place on him and how much he might get in the open market. Keeping in mind that the salary cap's going to go way up, but it's going to go way up for everybody. So there'll be a lot of teams will have a lot of money to spend, and some of them more than the Vikings. Anyway, it's one of those crappy situations where it's crappy for the young woman who is involved in this most of all, and for the Vikings, it leaves them with again another potential roster hole that they may have to fill both short term and long term,
and an issue they don't want to deal with. It's one of those deals that during the off season, it's the one time the teams dread everything because they don't have control and visibility over these players, and that's when they get in trouble, and it's just an added headache. And it's for fans like us, it's a disappointment because we don't want anybody that the Vikings have selected to turn out bad and be evil and even be accused of things like this. So that's what it is. Now, Dan wanted to talk about linemen. Well, there's linemen on both sides of the ball, and we'll first start off talking about Michael Pierce. What did you think of how the Vikings treated him this last week when they brought him in and showed him around?
I thought that was really great. It was almost like they were giving him like the second. It was like free agency all over again for Michael Pierce. And welcome back, guy. And we didn't forget about you. And we're come back quickly because our run defense was god awful last year. And I really liked the stuff that I heard from Pierce, like he opted out last season, and it sounds like he's really pumped to play and really. He made those decisions for health reasons, but he admitted that as the season went on and he saw how the NFL dealt with the COVID situation, that he regretted what he did. It was too late then, but that whole year, for him to be, you would expect him to be pumped to play every new year. But I'm sure he'll be. I think there might be something to be said for being a little bit extra hungry after you've been sitting out a year. And you don't accumulate all that mileage and those nicks and those injuries too that an extra year of playing in the trenches would give you. So he should be very fresh. It sounds like he's got himself in pretty good shape. That was not always the case in Baltimore. Nope. He came to camp one year like 490 pounds.
Yeah. He was well over 400 pounds, and the Ravens were pissed.
Yeah, as well they should be. And now he said, I've changed my diet a bit. I changed how I take care of my body, and I'm at like 340 or something like that. And
I think
he
it
feels
was
that's a really
335 or somewhere in that range. I said the Svelte 335. And the one thing he said was that Coach Patterson said, get a trainer for last year and get a nutritionist. And he said, I took the advice and I already had it. He said, I already had a trainer, but I also got a nutritionist. And he goes, I have never felt so good in my entire life as I do now. He goes, I could put on another 5 pounds and plan to before season. Mm-hmm. But he goes, right now, I'm great. And he talked about and the training side, doing the Squat-tober, the powerlifting, and squats during all last October. When you think of the muscles that builds in the lower body and the legs, for a nose tackle, that is the primary power point, right? Because they're going to plant those tree trunks and push, right? Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what you want of your nose tackles. You want them, if they get hit, they don't move, and hopefully that they can drive the pile towards the quarterback. And he was just working on that. And he says he's also working on the cardio stuff and Peloton so that he has his wind and everything else, but he's stronger and he's faster. And I think it's going to be, I'm excited to see him and Tomlinson side by side on that defensive front. It gets me giddy because I think these guys are going to be good.
Yeah, much better than what we've seen, certainly saw last year. And I also liked, he talked about after, I wasn't sure how connected he was to the Vikings last year when he was off. And so to hear all those things about the training he did, is talking with Andre Patterson about nutrition and training, and also that in the ESPN article was talking about how after every game he'd be talking to the Vikings assistant defensive line coach and going over what Pierce would go over what he saw in the game and conversing about that. So I found that really encouraging, because that he was willing to try to even play a bit of a coaching advisor role, even though he wasn't playing, and sticking in contact with the Vikings and the Vikings defensive staff. I thought that was really good. He sounds very happy about the Tomlinson signing and being ready to rock with Tomlinson as his playing next to him. It sounds like he's in shape, and so much like yourself, I'm really quite encouraged if those two guys can stay healthy. How different the Vikings run defense, particularly up the middle, is going to look like in 2021. If Pierce can be kind of a guy like a 2-down dude who gives you what Pat Williams or Linval Joseph would give you back in his 2014, 2017 heyday, I think that's going to solve a lot of our early down problems that we saw last year, and even in 2019 to some degree, where it seemed like the offenses really had a little bit too easy time of it getting 5 yards on first down just by handing the ball off and running a stretch play on us. I don't think that Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson are going to allow that to happen nearly as much as what we've seen the past 2 years. And if you can get an offense in second and long and third and long, it's it's a Captain Obvious here, but it's harder for them to convert those.
Yes, and it makes it a whole lot more pleasurable for your pass rushers at that point, because they just pin the ears back and it's, I'm going to kill the quarterback. And they just go at it. And that's what they live for. And I think it's going to be great.
Assuming we have any pass rushers.
Well, we should at least have one. I expect more. And I expect, we talk about the big guys being 2-down linemen. Don't be surprised if you're seeing them there a lot of times all 3 downs. And then only on rare occasions do they rotate in a, quote, pass rusher type defensive tackle or defensive end to replace one of them. I fully expect to see a lot of those big guys there. I think the whole idea is to push that front part of that pocket. They don't need to get the necessary sacks or pressures, but if they move those offensive linemen back a few yards into the quarterback's face where he's got to squirt out on either side, I think that is a success. They'll view it as a success because you'll have Hunter and whatever rotations on the other side just closing the door. And that's what I'm expecting to see. But who knows? We don't know what's going to happen in the draft. And speaking of the draft, what do you think?
I should say, just to clarify, I think it's Pierce more that I see is probably going to be a 2-down guy, and that I think Tomlinson's going to be a guy who's playing pass rush downs too, because he did that with the Giants, and he's shown to be a better pass rusher than Pierce. And Pierce talked about improving his pass rush ability, and that Tomlinson could help him with that. Now guys say that all the time about, I'm going to get, I'm really working on this thing that I'm not very good at, and then sometimes they end up improving and sometimes they don't. It's like, long story short is, I'm liking what I'm hearing from Michael Pierce, and I'm really anxious to see him play in the middle of the Vikings defense and him pushing some guys around instead of it being vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I love it. It's gonna make it awful hard for Bradbury in practice.
Yeah,
Bradbury's.
Well, that could be
good for Bradbury.
Good. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, like if he's got to go up against big guys like that who actually are much better, how much improvement are you getting if you're facing Jaleel Johnson and Shamar Stephan day after day in practice? And we know that those guys were some of the worst graded, or maybe the worst graded defensive tackle in the NFL last year. So it just seems like if you're facing much better competition in practice, maybe at first off you're getting rolled pretty bad, but you got to adjust to that and improve. And it could be one of those things where it just doesn't help the Vikings run defense or defense overall, but helps the Vikings offensive line and its offense in general.
Yep. Very well could be. Now, we want to talk about linemen. Where do you see the Vikings going in the draft?
The one thing about the draft that I think most of us are pretty set on the fact that it's going to be either an offensive tackle situation in the first round or early in the draft, or an edge rusher early in the draft, and that's kind of where we see it going. The problem with particularly with the edge rushers is that that doesn't seem to be like in the first round, second round area. That doesn't seem like we're the draft classes is stacked there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of question marks, even amongst some of the highly rated guys like Rousseau and Jalen Phillips from Miami and Kwity Paye from Michigan. They've all got they got some pluses, but they got a fair bit of minuses too. Some of it is that neither of them have played a whole lot in the past couple of years. But I still think that 14 edge but most likely offensive line, offensive tackle is where we're going to go. What is interesting though is that, and we've talked about this before, is in the draft is what the Vikings pick and what they're able to what they do could really be. I don't know, Viking Jerome, if Jalen Phillips is going to be available in the second round, and we don't have a second rounder right now. But
you said trade.
Trade.
You'd have to trade and move down, get a second rounder, trade down a little bit, move and get a second rounder.
I was looking at the the Chase Stewart Pro Football Reference draft thing, and I don't pretend to understand it all, but Dave, you can fix me if I'm wrong on this one. But just looking at it, where we're at 14th right now, and I think that translates in that draft trade value chart was like 1,100 points. If we want to get a second rounder, trade down and get a second rounder, you can't do that if you like go from 14 to like 16 or 14 to 17. The point. So what I was looking at, and again, I may have interpreted this wrong, but it's around the 23rd to 24, trading down to that level. That's about as early. Or that's about the least we can trade down and have the point value correspond to that. We could get a second rounder. We could trade from 14th to 23rd and get a second rounder from that team. Then the points work out according to this one trade value chart. So that's one possibility. We 23rd or below, we could get our second rounder back. The only thing with that is that if you do that, you're probably going to miss out on some people that you would have took at 14, like a Rashawn Slater, offensive tackle, like a Christian Darashaw, like Elijah Vera Tucker, like Kwity Paye. Paye might be gone even before 14, like Jalen Phillips. These guys that have been mocked to the Vikings in various mocks, and we don't know if the Vikings like these guys, but these are highly rated tackles and edge rushers. And if you trade down to 23rd or 24th or even lower, you get your second rounder, but you miss out on some of those guys. So I'm not against that. I'm just, if we trade down, we may not get some of these guys that we could have got at 14. And that's going to make the draft very interesting, I think. But I do not like the fact that we are, after 14th, we wouldn't pick until the 78th pick in the third round, and that's 64 spots. That's a very big gap. We just sit there for 64, and a lot of guys that we like are going to be taken by other teams. It seems like too big of a gap to me, especially with this team having the amount of holes and depth problems that it has all over the place. So I'm cool with trading out of 14 and going to 23rd or 24th or 25th. I think that there'll still be some guys that we can get a little bit later in the first round that would meet our needs, and you get a second rounder, and maybe you get a guy like an Ezra Cleveland or a Brian O'Neill shows up either on the offensive line end of thing, or somebody like an Everson Griffin type drops and is in the second round. And because you got that second rounder, you can get them too. So I'm big on trading down and getting that second round pick. I think the 64 gap is too large right now with what we've got. And we've even got, there's a lot of guys that we could even target in the third or fourth round as well. I think there's a lot of edge guys in that third or fourth round area that we could take with the draft capital we have there. And another area that the Vikings really got to have to focus on, I think, and I don't know if you hear about it as much as offensive, certainly don't hear about it as much as the offensive line or defensive end, but safety. If you look at the fact that Xavier Woods is only signed for 1 year, and the hitman, I think his contract, his contract is done after 2022, I think. Yeah. But either way, you have to prepare for the future. And I don't think Josh Metellus and Luther Vandross Kirk and whoever else, like those aren't really the future for us. We have to start. We need to draft, I think, a safety fairly early in this draft and in that third round, fourth round area. And there's a number of guys that could fit there. One guy that's, I think some good targets would be that the Florida State safety, like Hamza Nasruddin, 6'3", about 215 pounds or something like that. I've seen him mocked a number of times at the Vikings. He could be a target in the third, fourth round. Darius Washington, Derek Foster. These are all different, Derek Forrest, but these are a number of guys that could be Viking targets for safety, which I think we need to take somebody there. And even edge, even if we take one in the first round or the second round, there's a number of guys. I wouldn't mind seeing us go and take a swing for another guy in the third or fourth round too. There's a number of interesting kind of tweener dudes there too, like that Carlos Basham Jr. from Wake Forest. I've seen him linked to the Vikings. Ronnie Carl Perkins from Oklahoma. He could go earlier than the third or fourth. He might be a second round guy, but and we don't have a second round pick, but he's a possibility. Somebody that I know Drew Bunting likes a lot. Patrick Jones from Pittsburgh. Another guy is Deo. I can't pronounce his last name, from Vanderbilt, but and then there's a kid from Notre Dame whose name I really can't pronounce. Like, there's a number of these guys on the edge that aren't first round, even second round,
right?
But could be in the Vikings sweet spot in the third or fourth where we have more picks.
Right.
I think so. Edge, and of course offensive line, particularly the interior, and safety are some areas that we're going to have to really address.
Jerome just asked about quarterbacks in the third or fourth. I'm going to ask about what do you do if there's a quarterback available at 14?
Yeah.
Say
I just
Trey Lance drops or
Jones from Alabama.
Jones or even Pierce. That was his name? The kid from Ohio State.
Oh, you mean Fields?
Fields. Yeah, Fields.
I don't think there's any way Fields would be there at 14. I just can't see it. Trey Lance is a different story just because, he didn't play this year except for that one game, and he is considered raw and needs more. He's not a guy that is going to come in immediately and be able to start for you and all that stuff. I think it sounds like more and more, and it might be a smokescreen, that he might possibly drop to 14. If he's there at 14, I think that's I don't see the Vikings drafting him with Cousins here for this year and next. I just don't see it. But if Lance was there at 14, it certainly gives the Vikings a nice opportunity there's going to be people wanting to trade up to get him. And that's when we could really maybe pull off a nice trade and get some, more than just a second rounder, but maybe lots more.
Get some better value on that trade.
Yeah.
And that's what I think they would do. But I would love to have, say, if Trey Lance or Fields dropped, if they selected him, one, I think that might motivate Kirk Cousins. I don't know if the Vikings next year, Kirk Cousins will be the second highest paid player in the league. And if they have the ability to have somebody that sat behind him and learned, they might say, hey, he's up for trade. next year. Plus, it may motivate him just like up in the team from Wisconsin did with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if they would or not. I also see hey, would be teams that would want to trade up and get him, so we get the greater trade value. Now, when it comes to, say they don't, we pick our offensive lineman or edge. We get to the third or fourth round. Would you select a quarterback there?
Yeah, for sure. And there was the kid from Stanford, somebody whose names gets thrown around there. I think
Mills.
Yeah. And I have seen a little bit of him since his name came up. And I was surprised by his athleticism and his mobility. So I kind of like him in that fourth, third round area. And Kellen Mond's another name that gets thrown around a lot. Super athletic, super erratic guy, but lots of talent. And the guy that, again, if you got Cousins there, he can sit for a year or two, learn, develop, and then you might have him ready to go in 2023 when he's actually ready to start. And you still got him cheap for another year or two.
There's also Kyle Trask, the big guy.
Yeah, Trask. I don't know how I only saw him play in the bowl game, like and he did not have a very good game there. I don't know, but that doesn't override what he did the entire season or previously at Florida. I just found him to be, he didn't, and this is just me, right? But he didn't really impress me when that game that I saw. And so, but again, third, fourth round, hey, I could see the Vikings taking him if he's there, and I would not be upset with that at all, because what do I know about football? Like, I saw him play one game. He didn't play very well, and I'm like, he's no good.
But, and everybody has a bad game.
That's
no matter who it is.
Right.
Tom Brady's had bad games.
Yep. And so those guys, if they feel like they're those guys are players who are been considered to be third, fourth round guys, and we're drafting them in that round. Quarterback, despite having Cousins, is a need in my view, especially somebody who could be your backup. Like right now, it's pretty scary to see that Nate Stanley could be our backup quarterback, or Jake Browning.
Well, that's to me, that's an indicator, right? They haven't re-signed Mannion. So that tells me they're waiting on the draft, right? Because if they get a quarterback during the draft relatively high, that guy is assumed to be the backup, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they don't get a quarterback in the draft, all they got to do is ring Mannion's number and go, hey, bud, bet minimum, come back. And I'm sure that's the case. So to me, it indicates that they are looking at quarterbacks in the draft, which is something I find interesting.
It is because of, I probably what you're thinking, and we've said it before, it's interesting because then that would indicate that they're hedging their bets on Cousins after next year, or even before that, right? You know, like if you get like Kellen Mond or Trask or Mills comes in, and for some reason he has to play earlier than expected, like what happened with Dak Prescott and Tony Romo's situation. He lights the world on fire, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, hey, Kirk, we don't need you anymore. See you later. And we're and you know that you could. A guy with Cousins' track record, you're going to be able to trade him to somebody. Maybe you're not going to be able to. Maybe you're going to have to eat some of that salary, and maybe you're not going to get everything that you would like. But you get something of reasonable value for trading Kirk Cousins to a team that needs a quarterback.
Right.
San Francisco apparently was going to, they had an offer on the table, right? There's other teams like that out there.
And there will be after next year, because, everybody thinks they all have their quarterback problem solved this year, and then we'll get towards the end of the season, there'll be teams going, we're desperate for a quarterback. So we know that happens.
It happens every year. And it'll happen again.
Well, what position do you think they're going to pick in the first round?
I think they're going offensive line. Yeah, I think particularly if they stay at 14, like if someone like Darashaw's there, or even Vera Tucker, especially because Tucker can, he's like the guy who can swing. He could play both. Although again, we've talked about picking a guard at 14 is, unless you're getting Steve Hutchinson, isn't maybe the most popular move. But Tucker's got a lot of people that like what he does out there.
And, I also like Darasol.
Yeah, well, and yeah, he's a guy, or those two guys. If you could get them, if the Vikings draft them in the first round, no matter where they get them, I think a lot of people will be pretty happy with the selection. Unless we like traded up to like number 2 and took like Vera Tucker.
Well, no, then they'd be upset. If they traded up, if they traded up, it would be for Sewell, I would think. What Tyler Fornes, member of Gallahorn's, putting out, he's already started his series, top 5 positions. Today he put out his quarterbacks, so look for that over on the Climbing the Pocket YouTube page. We get to tackles. Tackles will be Tuesday. Tuesday. We talk about that, and we get a debate. I would love Sewell. Sewell to me is surefire, blue chip. Dude can rock, right? He can play tackle. You could put him at guard if you wanted to. He's going to dominate no matter where he is, and he's only 20. Now, what Tyler's big deal is, don't trade up for him, because you could possibly get Rashawn Slater, at 14, and I'm like, I don't think Slater's going to drop that low. I'm thinking more like 10, somewhere in there. But you could get somebody like Slater, and there's not that much of a difference. And I would go Sewell, Slater, Darasol when it came to pure tackles. And but you could have Darasol. We've seen Darasol fall to 14 quite a bit. I would be happy with any one of those. Vera Tucker would be the only quote guard. Tackle / guard I'd like to take at that high. But
if you get early in the rounds, it all depends on who goes where. But if a lot of quarterbacks get taken early, like obviously Lawrence is going number 1, everybody thinks his face, Zach Wilson is going to go like in the top 3.
We'll go Justin number Fields 2 to the Jets, and then the question
Justin Fields was supposed to be a top 5, but and then even Mac Jones, Trey Lance, those 5 players, if they're eating up spots between 1 and 14, then you've got some pushing people down. Like somebody like Kwity Paye is going to go pretty early too, it'll just leave more variety for the Vikings, especially on the offensive line. If guys like Darashon, Slater, and Vera Tucker aren't gone. Right. And then there's the wide receiver side of things too, like Smith and Chase. Those guys, teams are going to be picking those too. That's a couple more.
Waddle, Bateman.
Fans
would love if we selected Bateman.
The Vikings fans always, if it was up to most Viking fans, we'd pick like 25 Gophers every year in the draft.
Or Gophers, or Minnesota State, or South Dakota, North Dakota, somewhere in there.
Or the son of a former Viking who plays wherever.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Draft him.
Draft him.
They were right about Antoine Winfield Jr.
Exactly, like they were about Winfield.
It would have been nice to draft him.
Yes, it would have. We would have been sat at safety. We wouldn't be worried about it. Well, this has been a great conversation. I agree with you on offensive linemen. You talk about Kwity Paye. I still take our buddy Drew's initial impression as he watched Michigan every single play of that kid's career. He says he's not worth a first rounder, but I think defensive ends are being inflated in their value. Phillips is the one I'm interested in, but his issue is the health and the concussions. I think he would be better out of those two. It's just, I think, solve the major problem, right? They always talk, fix the big 80% and you'll solve the majority. I think our big 80% right now is offensive line. Fix that. That improves the offense. I think our defense is already improved by who's come back and who we've picked up in free agency. And let's go for that. So I agree with you. I think our first pick will be offensive lineman. The question will be who. We'll have to find out. Now, I want to let everybody know, Climb in the Pocket will be going live for the entire draft. Not only just round one, where we'll be competing with our old buddies, Ted and Drew, and there should be more amusing and fun. I will have them streaming as well as going live with some of the CTP shows. But we'll do day 2 and day 3, and you will catch both me and Darren doing a 2 old bloggers on probably day 3 as we wrap up what the Vikings did and what we think about it. So join us for that. And in the meantime, join friend of the show, Tyler Fornes, on his daily drop of 5 top people in each position and the rest of Climb in the Pocket Network as we build up to your 2021 Vikings draft. Until
Tyler
then,
knows his stuff. Tyler knows his stuff too,
he
so
does.
that's always a good one to check out on the draft prospects.
Any last words there, Darren?
The last words are just looking forward to the. I don't imagine. Thanks for listening in or watching, Mary. You're like our you and Viking Jerome and Dan and some of the others are diehards. But I don't know why you stop in to listen to me. But anyway, Dave is the big draw. But
No.
yeah, looking forward to the draft in a couple of weeks. I don't imagine there'll be anything earth-shattering that'll happen with the Vikings next week. Anything that would happen will probably be bad, so we don't want anything that, like somebody's done something stupid again, like a DUI. But the draft in 2 weeks' time, that really is like that kind of. Once that happens and we get this new crop of rookies, that just seems to like tide us over for the next couple of months. We can talk about their potential until we get to training camp and we can actually start thinking and looking forward to seeing them play and football actually being played again. So really looking forward to the draft. It's always a lot of fun. And last year was a lot of fun when you went 3 days of the draft on Climbing the Pocket. You guys had a lot of stamina to do what you did there.
Well, we were wasted after that third day. It took out a lot.
Yeah, no.
But we're going to do it again because why not? It was fun. Let's do it again. We look forward to everybody joining us, telling us your opinion. Tell us when the Jets make some stupid pick and you go, why? Laugh at the team from Wisconsin when they don't select a wide receiver. And, things like that. Should be fun.
Yeah, and complain about Spielman trading back multiple times in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round.
Yeah, I want all my picks in the top 100. You get better quality and value rather than trade down this year to get 20 picks and set a new record. Hey, Rick, why don't we trade up and get more in that top 100? Food for thought. Until then.
What
Skol,
a concept.
everybody.
Skol Vikings. Happy Sunday.
Thank you for watching or listening. As always, if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate us on your favorite aggregator. Skol, everybody.